So today we're here talking about the prosperity paradox and his new book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this and kind of what your motivation for this was?
Yeah, Jaden, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I got into this when I met Professor Clayton Christensen. He's the one who sort of, called me in and said, hey, let's write a book about how innovation can really impact a lot of poor countries. And so many of the ideas in this book really stemmed from Professor Clayton Christensen, who's a professor at Harvard Business School. But my journey to the prosperity paradox really happened about 10, 11 years ago. And that was when I read about this 10-year-old girl in Ethiopia who had to wake up every morning at 3 a.m. To fetch firewood, walk miles, and sell in this city. And I think as I was reading, it's about 10 years ago, it hit me that, I'm in the U.S., I'm having a good time, but I just had to do something about it. And that's really when I began my life took on a sort of a different trajectory that has led me here now to co-authoring this book.
Wow, that's amazing. So I understand, at heart you wouldn't necessarily call yourself a writer. What advice would you kind of give to a lot of entrepreneurs who maybe find themselves struggling, being like, well, I'm not a writer, or I'm not a podcaster, or I'm not a, they think they aren't necessarily made to do a specific thing, but that's kind of where their path is calling them. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not a writer. My first degree is in engineering, computer engineering. So the only thing I've been writing then was code, and that's not a book. And then the second degree was in business. I got an MBA, and so that's also not a writing degree. But I think my response to people who sort of categorize themselves a certain way and say, I'm this, I'm not that, really stems from an idea that I learned in Professor Christensen's class. It's this notion of having a deliberate or emergent strategy. I'll explain. See, when you have an emergent strategy, what that means is you are in a position of learning. You're in a position of understanding what strategy you're actually going to employ and execute on. Right? And I think if many of us had more of an emergent strategy in life, we would be more open to opportunities that come our way. We wouldn't necessarily put ourselves in one bucket because we're still emerging.
Right.
And I think once you then find an opportunity that fits with what you want to do, in this case for me it was writing. I never thought I would write a book after being an engineer and getting a business degree. Never thought I'd write a book, but I had sort of this emergent strategy in that I was open to opportunities that came my way. And the minute I saw this opportunity to write a book with Professor Christensen and Karen Dillon, I instantly converted to what we now call a deliberate strategy. And I made sure we executed on it and we finished it. And so I think it's a matter of timing. It's just making sure you have an emergent strategy that says, look, I may see myself as an engineer, but if there's an opportunity to write, if there's an opportunity to host a podcast show, if there's an opportunity to sing, it really doesn't even matter, to join a startup, to build a business, then you want to be open to it, as long as it falls in line with a lot of your values.
Okay, yeah, I really like that.
Is that a mindset type thing? You just have to be in that mindset all the time, or is that something which is more of a skill?
Absolutely, it's got to do with your mindset. But I think what's important is your mindset matures and grows and develops over time. And so the more you entertain the idea of having an emergent strategy, the better you're going to be at it, the better you're going to be open-minded. So if you think about it, closed-minded people are often always closed-minded because they practice it a lot of the time. Open-minded people get more open-minded over time because that's what they practice. And so for me, if you use this example, I was an engineer, I did an MBA, and now I've got a book largely because, to your point, I had this mindset that was open-minded, I had an emergent strategy. The next time there's an opportunity for me to have this emergent strategy and be open-minded, I'm gonna be open-minded because I'm like, look at what happened the last time I was open-minded. And so I think the more you do it and see successes that come from it, the better you'll be at doing it.
That's really cool. What would you say, so the book is, how innovation can lift nations out of poverty. What would you say, for anyone interested in reading your book, what's like one piece of advice or one of your favorite concepts that this book kind of encapsulates or talks about?
Man, that's a tough one. I'll give you two.
Okay.
Chapter 2 is titled "Not All Innovation is Created Equal."
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason we did that is innovation's a buzzword. It's a word that everybody sort of uses. Everything's innovative. Every program is innovative, and that might not be false. It's actually true, but it's less helpful in how you think about organizations or the economy. And so for us, we're like, okay, let's help you understand innovation through the lens of an economy. And from there, we explain 3 different types of innovations and how they impact an economy. And I think you're going to get a lot of value from the way we categorize that. The second thing that I want to talk about, I know you asked for only one, but let me know two.
Give them all to me.
All right. The second thing I want to talk about is chapter 9. It's titled, get this, corruption is not the problem, it's a solution. I'll say that again. Corruption is not the problem, it's a solution. Now, because we're writing this book largely for people who work in low to middle income countries, people who are in the development space, in doing investments or entrepreneurship in these countries, corruption was something that kept coming up. And the approach we took in really diagnosing, dissecting, and understanding corruption is very different from sort of conventional approaches, which say root out corruption, prosecute it, and throw out the bad guys. That's the approach many countries have been taking for decades, but the progress is really slow. What we do is we try to understand, why do people engage in corruption in the first place? Then after that, we try to understand, how have wealthy countries that are fairly transparent, how have they solved their corruption problem, or how have they mitigated corruption? And then from there, we then propose ways that low-income countries can mitigate corruption or fight their corruption. And you'll find the suggestions in that chapter very intriguing, I think. It's one of the favorite chapters many people who have read it say.
That's really cool. I think a lot of people can really relate to this. Specifically here, we have one of the most diverse BYUs. Well, we have the most diverse BYUs, one of the most diverse universities in America, with people from all over the world, and the percentage of students from different places is pretty phenomenal. And I think a lot of those people can really take a lot of these tips and bring that back home, And I'm sure that was kind of a purpose for this book, right? Is to spread it to people that can take it to those developing nations, and influential people here in America that can help make those kind of impacts.
Absolutely. That is the goal for the book. I mean, we really want to help fundamentally change how we think about development, how we think about low and middle income countries, because I'm originally from Nigeria. I left Nigeria about 19 years ago to come study in the U.S. and make a better life for myself. But I left Nigeria behind. Nigeria is still poor, still struggling. And I didn't have hope that we could ever get better. I mean, that's just, I was like, there's no way we can get better. There's too much corruption. We don't have the right institutions. The infrastructure is not there. I mean, you name it, we had it. Then I began to do research on this book. And the book really helped me see that innovation is central to development. The book helped me understand how other countries have lifted themselves out of poverty through innovation. And then I realized there is hope for Nigeria. We don't have to clean up everything first before we improve the country. We can actually improve time. So for me, the book, if I could summarize it with one word, is hope. It gives hope to a lot of people who thought there was no way forward.
I love that. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone in maybe that's currently in a country like Nigeria right now, looking for their next innovation, their next thing to kind of help pull them out of poverty? What's a piece of advice you'd give to them?
So I think the biggest one would be look for what we call struggle in the book. Look for what in the context of your economy is very difficult for people. And if you can develop a solution that helps solve that problem, then you're not only going to make people's lives better, but you're going to improve your life because there's going to be a huge market for it. And so once you can find struggle, and that struggle could come in, people not having access to education. You look at that and you say, man, people don't have access to good education. I'm going to take that as an opportunity and figure out a solution. You look at your local community, people not having access to good logistics and distribution. You look at that and you say, what if I developed a solution that helped solve that problem? It could be small, it could be big, but once you identify struggle, take a step back, think about how you can develop a solution that solves that struggle, and my sense is there's going to be huge opportunity waiting for you.
How do you address the sustainability facet of that? Because lots of countries have had kind of aid brought in, and sometimes that actually exacerbates the problem. And lots of the education systems which are installed kind of like third party by a different country, they have an issue of sustainability.
Absolutely. So that's why this book focuses on prosperity. It doesn't focus on alleviating poverty. Now, those are two very different things. When you create prosperity, you have a very different strategy. Sustainability is at the core of what you do when your focus is on creating prosperity. When your goal is on alleviating poverty, helping people live just a slightly better lives, sustainability isn't really part of your strategy. And so I learned that lesson through my organization, Poverty Stops Here. The goal was primarily to alleviate poverty. And we would build a well, it would break. But before it broke, it did alleviate poverty, right? I mean, people had water for 6 months, sometimes a year. That alleviated poverty. But when your focus is on creating prosperity, you have an entirely different vision. So an example I'll give that helps support that point is, in chapter 1, we talk about an entrepreneur by the name of Mo Ibrahim. 20 years ago, he looked at Africa and said, I want to bring cell phones, mobile phones to the average African. People said, you're crazy, Mo, this can never work. What do you mean you want to bring, these are poor, you got AIDS, corruption, bad governments, I mean, you name it, right? But he said, there's an opportunity here. He focused on that struggle I was talking about earlier. And he said, there's an opportunity to create a new market for people to have mobile phones. To cut the long story short, fast forward 7 years after he started the company, Mo Ibrahim was able to create a vibrant and exciting company called Celtel, operated in about 7 countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Niger, Mali, Sudan, and he found that he was able to sell that company that he had created seven years prior for $3.4 billion.
Wow.
Now that industry that he sort of triggered has grown to today now in economic value upwards of $200 billion, provides billions of dollars in tax revenues for many African countries. That's the kind of thing that can happen as a result of changing the mindset from just alleviating poverty to creating prosperity.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much. We're super excited. I'm going to dive into this book pretty soon myself.
Good.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jake.